I really think that when the survival gene is activated, preservation is the key. So we can have 10 things that happen really great in our lives. You have a family member or somebody you know that does this. They have 10 really great things happen in their one thing bad, and they focus on that bad thing. Why? Because the survival gene is activated. They want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So you put your attention on it because you don't want it to happen again. So what people do when they're aroused is they start thinking it's going to happen. And so they actually select the worst case scenario in their mind and then emotionally embrace that future before it happens. And they're conditioning their body to become the mind of anxiety and fear. So in preservation and in survival, if you prepare for the worst, anything less that happens, you have a better chance of surviving. So that's the mechanism that takes place. So survival means you better take care of your body.
Yeah.
You better be aware of your environment and make sure there's no threats. And so you got to keep your eye out there. And you better be thinking about the future based on what you learned in the past. Now, there's nothing wrong with that when the analytical facilities are in balance. But when there's an arousal, there's 3 things that create arousal: fear, hostility and anger or aggression, and pain. And that arousal drives the brain into these high states of what we call high beta. And most people need something or someone or some circumstance or some drug or some pill or some computer game to change that internal state. And the moment they notice a change in their internal state, then they pay attention to what's causing it. And they start developing a dependency on it, right? So it turns out that when we teach people how to self-regulate and change their brainwaves, we could actually see then that the incoherence, the disorderliness that's taking place in the brain, when you're over-aroused, you're overly analytical, and you're shifting your attention from one problem to one person to one thing to one place to another problem to another circumstance to your phone to your car. And each one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal causes these different circuits to fire out of order, and the brain is incoherent. So take 2 waves that are out of phase and mix them. When they interfere, they flatten out. There's no energy. So energy leaves the brain, right? So then when you're in arousal, you narrow your focus on the cause. If there's something rattling in the bushes and it's dark, you freeze and you narrow your focus on it, and there's a rush of adrenaline and your pupils dilate and your heart starts to race, and you're ready to run, fight, or hide. I mean, that's a survival moment, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you or 6 feet away, and you're judging them? The same arousal's taking place, and what's once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. And this is where it gets challenging. So when we teach people how to open their focus, we've done thousands and thousands of brain scans, and they get beyond their analytical processes, and they open their awareness and go from a convergent focus to a divergent focus, and they learn how to relax and regulate. Their brain waves start to slow down into alpha. And then if they do it properly and they're connecting those different compartments of the brain that were once firing out of order, start to unify. Different communities form bigger communities. The brain starts to synchronize. And then all of a sudden you start seeing different compartments of the brain all in resonance. So now when they're all in resonance and they start interfering, when those waves come together, there's more energy in the brain. So when a person dials down the mechanism, this neocortex that plugs us into 3-dimensional reality, that keeps us aware of our body, that's the autobiographical self, where everything's stitched in memory in there. When we start deactivating the mechanism here, and we get beyond the memory bank of the known self, and brainwaves move into theta, we've studied this so much. When a person can let their body be in a light state of sleep and feel so safe that you can finally let go and surrender, the body is sleeping, but the mind is awake. And now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. And if they can regulate and stay there, something amazing happens. There's a release of energy from the body, and their brain goes into a very, very super coherent state of gamma. And gamma is super consciousness. Now, I'm not talking about a little gamma. I'm not talking about a lot of gamma. I'm not talking about a really lot of gamma. I'm talking about a supernatural amount of gamma. There's so much order and so much energy in the brain. Like if we were in an audience and we were all clapping like this, that could be alpha, right? Theta would be, and if everybody could do this, the slower we could do it, the more we can get our timing down, the more we can get coherent. But if we were doing this, it would be really hard for all of us to do that at the same time. So it takes a lot of order, a lot of awareness, a lot of energy to be able to create that kind of order. So that's how fast the brain is, and that arousal that's taking place is ecstasy. That arousal is bliss. It is the most familiar, unfamiliar feeling that people ever have. And that memory then that the person has that is so profoundly different than the feeling of success, the feeling of wealth, the feeling of orgasm or love or whatever. This is a new one, and it's a thrill. And the person notices a dramatic change in their inner state. And with that experience comes a very lucid picture, a very profound insight, a download of information. That's the moment then. The body many times rewrites the biological program. Energy is informing matter, and the autonomic nervous system is regulating. It's in high order. And remember, disease is autonomic dysregulation. Now it's getting into a very, very high frequency of order, and it's sending very coherent information to the cells and tissues, sending energy to the cells and tissues, and cells begin to emit more coherent light and information, and then there's the disease, and there it's not. And listen, I've seen it too many times. The person said, we had a guy in Cancun in our last event that was a veteran that came in a wheelchair. He had both his knees blown out. He had broken his back. He was extreme pain on the bottom of his feet. He couldn't walk. He was suicidal. He had post-traumatic stress disorder, tried everything. First walking meditation, he's out there lumbering around on 2 crutches. Next day, he's on 1 crutch. In the evening of the final meditation, I swear, he's running down the beach without his crutches, and the volunteers that usually help people with handicaps are chasing him, and he's running the other way. He hit gold. There's no pain in his feet, no limitation in his body. He got an upgrade. Now that arousal, that experience, he'll never forget. That's a new one. So I think that a lot of people, we get conditioned, like, oh wow, success, but sooner or later you're gonna be like, when the novelty wears off of that.
That's
like,
not what I meant either.
But here's the cool part. The cool part is like when you hit pay dirt like that, when you connect to the field, when you connect to the divine, whatever you want to call it, when your consciousness merges with a greater consciousness, and that arousal creates ecstasy, bliss, oneness, whatever you want to call that, you realize that it never came from anything out there. It didn't come from the wardrobe or the facelift, the sports car, or whatever. It came from within you. And so you stop looking out there for it. And now the love affair begins. And you never want to miss a date because it's just too good. So that memory then, that is what I'm after. Because when you have those transcendental moments and you understand this, the experience of that transcendental moment lays down new circuitry in the brain. That's what experience does. And the experience produces a feeling, but it's not chemical. It's electric and it's orderly, and every cell of your body is jiggling in order. And you're aroused and you're awakened, right? You have to admit, when that occurs, your spectrum of reality is going to broaden. Some conditioning, some illusion, some belief about a white guy with a beard keeping track of if you did something right or wrong, or you failed, or you let God down. That's not how it is. Something is removed. And you start seeing reality as it is, and all of a sudden, you start seeing the part that we edit out for survival. Now you start seeing patterns and lights and information that are transcendent of three-dimensional reality, and your spectrums. Why? Because your brain had the experience and the circuitry's there, and now your experience of the world changes. You get an upgrade to the VR set, to the virtual reality set. Oh, you got the upgrade, you got 2.0, and now it looks different. Everything looks different. Everybody looks different. The world, you're seeing beauty more. Well, and there's more holism and more connection, and sounds and words and music and sense and sight and light is all working together. I mean, that's the blessing of an awakening, right? That's where we're going.
When we focus our brain upon something in our external environment, anything which even has the slightest amount of worry, our brain goes into a state of survival, which is the typical normal reaction. Why is that? Well, that is because we tend to focus on the most negative outcome. We think of the worst case scenario, meaning we are mentally already there. We are experiencing the worst case scenario before the situation ever happens. However, the same way, if we choose to not think of the worst case scenario, we can choose not to go down the negative thought process. And to many at the beginning, it can be very difficult. But without a doubt, it is very possible. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and do make sure to share your thoughts with us in the comment section.